The morning sun burns through the humid Solomon Islands air as Lieutenant Commander Hiroshi Nishizawa adjusts his goggles and grips the control stick of his Mitsubishi A6M0. December 27th, 1942. Henderson Field lies below like a scar on Guadalcanal's green jungle. American bombers and fighters scattered across the coral runway like sleeping metal birds. For 16 months, Nishizawa and his fellow pilots have owned these skies. The Zero, risen to them, has been their sword of the heavens, outmaneuvering every American fighter thrown against them. Wildcats, Warhawks, Airacobras, all have fallen to the Zero's legendary agility and the skill of Japan's elite naval aviators. But something feels different today. His radio crackles with the voices of his squadron mates, their usual pre-combat banter tinged with an unusual tension. Intelligence reports have been strange. Fragmentary accounts of new American aircraft, twin-engined fighters. The descriptions make no sense. Why would the Americans put two engines on a fighter? It violates everything they know about aerial combat. Nani soar? What is that? The question has been haunting Japanese pilot ready rooms for weeks, whispered in fragments from pilots who claimed to have seen something impossible over the northern Solomons. Nishizawa banks his Zero into position, leading his formation of 8 aircraft toward Henderson Field. Below, the familiar sight of American P-39 Airacobras and P-40 Warhawks begins their takeoff roll. These aircraft he knows. These aircraft he can defeat. The P-40's bulky frame and poor climb rate. The P-39's dangerous spin characteristics and underwhelming performance above 15,000 feet. But today, something else is climbing from Henderson Field. At first, it looks wrong, like someone has attached 2 separate aircraft together. Twin booms stretch back from a central cockpit nacelle, each boom terminating in a vertical tail. Twin engines, twin propellers spinning in opposite directions. The design defies logic, defies everything Nishizawa has learned about fighter aircraft in his 200-plus combat missions. Nanda korewa, he mutters into his oxygen mask. What the hell is this? The formation of strange aircraft climbs with shocking speed, their twin engines hauling them upward at a rate that makes Nishizawa's Zero, his nimble, lightweight Zero, look sluggish by comparison. More disturbing still, they're climbing straight toward his formation's altitude with an aggressiveness that suggests their pilots aren't afraid. They should be afraid. Every American pilot should fear the Zero by now. But these twin-boomed monsters keep climbing, and Nishizawa realizes with growing unease that for the first time in his combat career, he's looking at something completely unknown, something that might change everything. The radio erupts with excited Japanese voices. Futago no Hikoki, twin aircraft. Nani wo suru? What do we do? What? Indeed. How do you fight something you've never seen before? 6,000 miles away, and 2 days earlier, Captain Tom Lynch of the 39th Fighter Squadron, 347th Fighter Group, had been briefing his P-38 pilots in a humid New Guinea tent. Maps of Guadalcanal covered a folding table. Aerial reconnaissance photos scattered like puzzle pieces showing Henderson Field and the surrounding Japanese positions. "Gentlemen," Lynch had said, his voice carrying the weight of months of preparation, "we're about to introduce the Japanese to something they've never seen before." The 18 P-38 Lightning pilots gathered around the table represented the culmination of 2 years of desperate American innovation. While Japanese Zeros had been shooting down American fighters with impunity across the Pacific, Lockheed's engineers had been working frantically to create an answer, a twin-engine fighter that could match Japanese performance while leveraging American industrial advantages. Second Lieutenant Rex Lamb, barely 22 and fresh from flight training, had stared at the intelligence photos with a mixture of excitement and terror. The briefing materials painted a sobering picture. Japanese pilots with hundreds of combat hours flying the most maneuverable fighter aircraft in the world over terrain they knew intimately. The Zero has advantages, Lynch continued, pointing to comparative performance charts. It can turn inside anything we've got. It can climb like a homesick angel at low altitude. And their pilots. Don't underestimate their pilots. They've been fighting for 4 years, some of them since China. But then Lynch had smiled, and the expression carried a predatory satisfaction that sent shivers through the assembled airmen. However, gentlemen, they've never seen a P-38. They don't know about our speed advantage, 83 miles per hour faster in level flight. They don't know about our climb rate above 20,000 feet. They don't know about concentrated nose armament, 4 50 caliber machine guns, and 1 20mm cannon, all firing straight ahead instead of converging from the wings. Staff Sergeant Mike Benson, Lynch's crew chief, had been listening from the tent entrance. Later, he would describe the pilots' faces during that briefing. Like kids on Christmas morning who just found out what was under the tree, but also scared as hell they might not live to play with their presents. The technical advantages were impressive on paper. Twin Allison V-17, 10 engines producing 1,475 horsepower each. Counter-rotating propellers eliminating torque effects. Turbo superchargers maintaining power at altitude. A top speed of 414 miles per hour, faster than any production fighter in the world. But statistics meant nothing until they faced the legendary Japanese pilots who had humiliated American air power from Pearl Harbor to the Philippines to Java. Now, climbing over Guadalcanal on December 27th, those theoretical advantages were about to face their ultimate test. Rex Lamb's hands were slick with sweat inside his leather gloves as he maintained formation on Lynch's wing. Through his canopy, he could see the approaching Japanese formation. 8 Zeros in perfect V formation, their pilots confident enough to maintain textbook positioning even with enemy fighters climbing to meet them. That confidence unnerved him. These weren't green pilots flying inferior aircraft. These were the men who had destroyed American air power across half the Pacific Ocean. But then Lamb looked at his instrument panel and felt a surge of hope. His airspeed indicator showed 380 miles per hour in the climb, faster than a Zero's maximum level flight speed. His altimeter was passing through 22,000 feet, where the P-38's turbo superchargers gave him a decisive advantage over the naturally aspirated Zero engines. Captain Lynch's voice crackled through the radio. Bandits, 11 o'clock high. 8 Zeros, probably from Rabaul. Remember your training. Speed is life. Altitude is life insurance. Don't dogfight them. Use your advantages. The Japanese formation was close enough now that individual aircraft details were visible. Lamb could see the distinctive greenhouse canopies, the fixed landing gear legs, the rising sun markings on wings and fuselage. Beautiful aircraft, he had to admit, elegant in their simplicity, but also suddenly, shockingly obsolete. Lieutenant Nishizawa's Zero formation was maintaining 25,000 feet when the impossible happened. The twin-boomed American fighters, whatever they were, kept climbing past Zero service ceiling, kept accelerating past Zero maximum speed, and arranged themselves in a perfect attack position with an ease that defied everything Nishizawa knew about aerial combat. His radio erupted with confused Japanese voices. Hayai! Fast! Takaku nobate iru! They're climbing high! Do tatakao! How do we fight them? For the first time in his combat career, Hiroshi Nishizawa realized he was facing aircraft that were simply better than his Zero. Not better flown, not better positioned, just better. The Americans had finally built fighters that could outperform the legendary Zero in speed, climb rate, and altitude capability. The twin-boomed fighters were positioning for an attack, and there was nothing his formation could do to prevent it. The Americans held every tactical advantage: altitude, speed, position, and initiative. Nishizawa's hands tightened on his control stick as he prepared for combat, unlike anything he'd experienced in 200 previous missions. The age of Zero supremacy was about to end. The first pass happens in seconds, but those seconds rewrite the rules of Pacific air combat forever. Captain Lynch rolls his P-38 into a dive from 27,000 feet, his twin Allison engines screaming as the Lightning accelerates past 450 miles per hour. Behind him, 17 more. P-38s follow in perfect echelon formation, their twin booms cutting through the thin air like metallic lightning bolts. Lieutenant Nishizawa sees them coming and reacts with the instincts of a veteran pilot. He throws his Zero into a hard left turn, the classic defensive maneuver that has saved his life dozens of times. The Zero responds instantly, its legendary agility allowing a turn radius that should make any attacking fighter overshoot. But Lynch doesn't overshoot. He doesn't even try to turn. Instead, the P-38 dives through the Japanese formation at a speed so tremendous that Nishizawa's eyes can barely track the twin-boomed shape as it flashes past. Lynch's concentrated nose armament, 4.50 caliber machine guns, and one 20mm cannon, erupts in a stream of tracers that converge on Zero tail number AI-154. The difference is immediate and devastating. Instead of wing-mounted guns with complex convergence patterns, the P-38's nose-mounted weapons fire straight ahead with precision that seems almost surgical. Zero AI-154 simply disintegrates, its lightweight construction no match for the concentrated firepower. Kuso! Nishizawa curses as his wingman's aircraft explodes in a ball of orange flame and aluminum fragments. But there's no time to mourn. Another P-38 is already diving through their formation. Lieutenant Rex Lamb's first combat engagement unfolds like a fever dream. His P-38 screams down through the Japanese formation, airspeed indicator needle pushing past 480 miles per hour. He selects a Zero and squeezes the trigger, feeling the aircraft shudder as all 5 weapons discharge simultaneously. The Japanese pilot tries to evade, throwing his Zero into a violent barrel roll. But at this speed, differential, evasion is impossible. Lamb's tracers rake the Zero from propeller to tail, and the beautiful, elegant fighter aircraft crumples like paper in a hurricane. But what shocks Lamb most isn't the easy kill. It's what happens next. Instead of being trapped in a turning fight with the remaining Zeros, he simply flies away. His P-38 speed advantage is so overwhelming that the Japanese fighters can't pursue. They can't catch him. They can only watch helplessly as he climbs back to altitude for another attack. For veteran Japanese pilots accustomed to turning dogfights where superior agility meant victory, this is psychological warfare as much as aerial combat. Their primary advantage, maneuverability, has been rendered irrelevant by sheer speed. Lieutenant Commander Nishizawa attempts to lead his remaining aircraft in a coordinated attack on the climbing P-38s, but the laws of physics work against him. His Zero service ceiling is 33,000 feet in perfect conditions. The P-38s are operating comfortably at 35,000 feet, using their turbo superchargers to maintain full power at altitude where Zero engines gasp for oxygen. Oikurenai, can't catch up. Dash crackles through his radio as his pilots struggle, with the realization that they're fighting aircraft that exist in a different performance envelope entirely. Sergeant Yamamoto, flying Zero number AI-167, attempts a climbing attack on a P-38 that seems to be flying straight and level. Surely, he thinks, These twin-engine monsters must be sluggish in a climb. But as his Zero struggles toward 28,000 feet, engine power fading in the thin air, the P-38 simply accelerates upward and away, its twin engines maintaining full power through altitude that leaves the Zero helpless. The psychological impact is immediate and devastating. These are pilots who have never been outclimbed, never been outrun, never been so completely outclassed that their skill and experience become irrelevant. Captain Lynch coordinates the second attack with cold precision, having watched the Japanese formation's confused response to the first pass. Fox 2 flight, take the trailing elements. Fox 3, come in from the north. Don't get drawn into a turning fight, hit and run. The P-38s dive again, and this time the Japanese formation begins to disintegrate. 3 more Zeros fall to the concentrated nose armament, their pilots never having faced weapons that fire with such accuracy. Wing-mounted guns require convergence calculations, careful positioning, precise range estimation. But the P-38's nose guns fire straight ahead. If the aircraft is pointed at the target, the weapons hit the target. Lieutenant Nishizawa realizes with growing horror that his tactical experience is useless against these aircraft. Everything he's learned about aerial combat assumes opponents with similar performance characteristics. But these twin-boomed fighters aren't just better. They're operating under completely different rules. He attempts one final coordinated attack, gathering his 3 remaining Zeros for a head-on pass against the reforming P-38s. It's a desperate gambit, but perhaps superior Japanese marksmanship can overcome the performance deficit. The head-on pass lasts 3 seconds. Rex Lamb, flying his first combat mission, finds himself nose-to-nose with a charging Zero at a closing speed of over 700 miles per hour. His training takes over. Center the target in the gun sight, squeeze the trigger smoothly, hold the trigger down. The concentrated firepower of 5 weapons firing straight ahead meets the distributed firepower of 2 wing-mounted guns firing at converging angles. The Zero's pilot, veteran though he is trying to hit a target while pulling significant G-forces in a high-speed turn. Lamb is flying straight ahead, his aircraft stable, his weapons fixed to fire along his line of flight. Physics determines the outcome. The Zero explodes in a shower of debris that hammers against Lamb's P-38 canopy like metallic hail. Nishizawa's remaining 2 aircraft flee south toward Rabaul, their pilots' confidence shattered along with their tactical doctrine. Behind them, 18 P-38 Lightnings reform in perfect formation, having destroyed 6 Zeros without loss. But the true victory isn't measured in aircraft destroyed. It's measured in the psychological transformation that has just occurred. Japanese pilots, for the first time since Pearl Harbor, have encountered American fighters that are simply superior. Not better flown, not better positioned, just better. In the cockpit of his undamaged Zero, racing south over Bougainville at maximum speed, Nishizawa's mind reels with the implications. The twin-boomed fighters, P-38s, intelligence would later confirm, represent a fundamental shift in Pacific air combat. Japanese pilots can no longer assume performance superiority. They can no longer dictate engagement terms. They can no longer fight the kind of war they've been trained to fight. As Henderson Field fades behind him, Nishizawa keys his radio. Honbu e tsuho, Atarashi, Amerikajin no Sentoki. Totemo hayaku, totemo tsuyoi. Report to headquarters. New American fighter. Very fast, very strong. It's the understatement of the Pacific War. Behind him, the P-38 Lightnings are landing at Henderson Field, their twin engines winding down after combat that has fundamentally altered the balance of power in the Solomon Islands. The pilots climb out of their cockpits with expressions of stunned satisfaction, having just participated in one of the most one-sided aerial victories in military history. The age of the P-38 Lightning has begun. The age of Japanese air superiority is over. The intelligence report reaches Rabaul that evening, but its implications take weeks to fully sink in throughout the Japanese Navy's air arm. Lieutenant Commander Nishizawa's account of the December 27th engagement reads like science fiction to pilots who have grown accustomed to Japanese air superiority. American twin-engine fighters, speed approximately 650 kilometers per hour, service ceiling above 10,000 meters, concentrated forward-firing armament. Pilots avoided turning engagements entirely, using speed and altitude advantages to attack and withdraw at will. Rear Admiral Yamamoto reads the report 3 times before summoning his staff. The implications are staggering, not just tactically, but strategically. If the Americans have developed fighters that can neutralize the Zero's advantages, the entire defensive perimeter strategy collapses. Within days, similar reports flood in from across the Solomon Islands. P-38 squadrons are appearing everywhere. The 339th Fighter Squadron, the 18th Fighter Group, elite units equipped with aircraft that render Japanese fighter tactics obsolete overnight. Japanese ace Saburo Sakai, recuperating from injuries sustained in earlier combat, receives detailed accounts from surviving pilots. His later memoir captures the psychological shock. The P-38 was the most formidable opponent we faced. It could outrun us, outclimb us, and engage us on its own terms. For the first time, Japanese pilots found themselves in aircraft that were simply inferior. But the impact extends far beyond individual pilot psychology. The P-38's arrival forces a complete revision of Japanese defensive strategy. Aircraft that once dominated Allied bombers with impunity now face fighter escorts they cannot catch. Airfields that once seemed secure now face attacks by fighters with unprecedented range. The entire tempo of Pacific air warfare shifts in America's favor. Captain Tom Lynch's 347th Fighter Group becomes the template for P-38 operations throughout the Pacific. By February 1943, Lightning squadrons are operating from bases across New Guinea, the Solomons, and the Northern Territory of Australia. Each deployment follows the same pattern: initial Japanese confusion, followed by desperate tactical adaptations, followed by grudging acceptance of American air superiority. The human cost for Japanese pilots is devastating. Men like Nishizawa, veteran aviators with hundreds of combat hours, find their expertise rendered obsolete overnight. Worse, the replacement pilots arriving from Japan lack the experience to adapt to the new reality. P-38s begin achieving kill ratios that seem impossible: 10-to-1, 15-to-1, ratios that reflect not just superior aircraft, but the psychological demoralization of an enemy that has lost technological supremacy. Rex Lamb survives the war with 12 confirmed victories, all scored in his P-38. Years later, he reflects on that first combat engagement. We knew the Lightning was fast, but we didn't understand what that speed meant tactically until we used it against the Zero. It wasn't just about performance specifications. It was about rewriting the rules of aerial combat entirely. The strategic implications ripple throughout 1943 and beyond. Japanese offensive operations in the Solomons become unsustainable when every bomber formation faces P-38 escorts that can match the escort speed and outperform defending fighters. The famous April 18th, 1943 interception of Admiral Yamamoto's aircraft becomes possible only because P-38s possess the range and performance necessary for such an audacious mission. By war's end, P-38 Lightnings have compiled one of the most impressive combat records in aviation history. Over 10,000 aircraft produced, more than 1,800 Japanese aircraft destroyed in aerial combat. Two of America's top 5 fighter aces, Richard Bong and Thomas Maguire, achieved their victories exclusively in P-38s. But perhaps the most significant impact is psychological. The twin-boomed fighter that Japanese pilots initially dismissed as ungainly becomes the symbol of American technological supremacy. The fork-tailed devil nickname, originally applied by German pilots, spreads throughout Japanese aviation with a mixture of fear and grudging respect. The December 27, 1942 engagement over Guadalcanal lasts less than 20 minutes, but its consequences reshape the Pacific War. In those few minutes, Japanese pilots discover that American industrial might has finally produced fighters superior to their beloved Zero. The shock of that discovery reverberates through Japanese military psychology for the remainder of the war. Today, aviation historians recognize the P-38's first combat appearance as one of the pivotal moments in Pacific air warfare, the moment when technological innovation overcame tactical experience, when American engineering answered Japanese pilot skill, when the twin-boomed Lightning announced that the age of Zero supremacy was over. The Japanese pilots were right to be shocked. They were witnessing the future of aerial combat, and it belonged to America.